Hello and welcome to the first part of the lecture on the Ottoman Empire. This part will be an overview and will cover men's clothing. Um, I decided to add this section on the Ottoman Empire, and I put it in the middle of the Renaissance because that was sort of the high watermark of the Ottoman Empire, just to get another point of view outside the Western world, just to see how an adjacent empire like the Ottomans, how they dressed, how differently they dressed, and what carried over into our modern day clothing. So let's begin. First, some historical context. The Ottoman Empire, if you did not know, was a large Muslim empire lasting from the 1300s to the end of World War I, where it was taken over by Turkey, modern-day Republic of Turkey. It started here, see this, where Constantinople was conquered, effectively ending the Byzantine Empire. The Ottoman Turks renamed it Istanbul, which means the city, or in the city, and there you have it. The peaks of the empire in terms of size and power was the 14th through 16th century. It was an enlightened Muslim state. You had a sultan at the head, a hereditary title, whose duty was to dispense justice fairly and defend the faith against Christian expansion. I'm a little tongue-tied today, I apologize. The most renowned sultan of the empire was Suleiman the Magnificent. Brilliant politician, almost succeeded in conquering a large swath of Europe. There was a great fear for quite some time in the 16th century in particular that Europe would be overrun by Muslims. He wasn't interested in that. He was interested in territory, but he was not interested in conquering Western Europe. He was not interested in wiping out Christianity. They just wanted to keep them from coming in and trying to convert all their people. Quite possibly, the Protestant Reformation may not have happened or had been delayed without his support. He financially supported it. He supported it with force when needed be. So it was a good way to keep Christians off guard, distracted, and not looking at his kingdom. So without Suleiman, there may not have been a Martin Luther or a Reformation. He was known for his fairness, generosity, artistic ability, so forth. And once he died, things started to go downhill. We get a bunch of pretenders and not as enlightened despots. They were masters of art and architecture. First to solve many engineering problems, such as how to build stable, high-vaulted domes. They perfected a decorative motif known as Arabesque, which adorned buildings inside and out. Basically, Muslim art does not allow for the recreation of human or animal figures, I believe. I may be talking in turn about animals, but you cannot represent the human form. So you get these beautiful kind of floral motifs and other geometrical motifs. This is what Arabesque is essentially what it is. Also, lots of scholars, poets, first to create modern translations, commentaries on ancient Greek philosophers such as Aristotle and Socrates. So there we are. Women did have a greater degree of dependence than might be imagined. We have all heard of the harem, or if we're using the Italian word, the seraglio. It has a sort of salacious reputation, but basically it's an apartment for female relative and juvenile male heirs, a separate area. The first wife of the Sultan acted as a chief advisors, and other wives actually would act as foreign ambassadors when needed. So it's not this love fest that we make it out. It's actually a thriving part of a palace. Okay, so since this is fashion, we need to know what the Quran says about dress. So here it is. Both men and women should be modest. Clothing must cover the entire body. Only hands and face are visible. No transparent material. We'll see some variations on that in a bit. So, clothing must hang loose. The shape of the body cannot be discerned. A woman's clothing must not resemble a man's clothing, and vice versa. Do not dress or look like a non-Muslim. Thank you very much. Do not artificially lengthen your hair, women. A young unmarried woman must not reveal her face in public. men's hair should be neat and not shoulder length or longer. So you can see kind of a religiously induced sumptuary law there. Let's talk about fabric real quickly. Chief among fabrics: silk, linen, cotton. Brocade was very popular. Velvet, imported from Italy. Ottoman weavers were masters at highly brocaded silk. Here's a 6th century silk brocade Ottoman garment. You can see the exquisite detail that goes into it. Often given as gifts to foreign diplomats or reward to deserving citizens. Highly praised, highly sought after. Two motifs used in brocading were stylized tiger stripes and triple spots. You can see both in this picture on the right of this tunic. The tiger stripes symbolize power and status. The spots represent jewels symbolizing wealth. Okay, also, Ottoman weavers were very adept at weaving silver and gold thread into the brocade, using a process similar to making wire, electrical wire, where they take silk warp threads, use silk warp threads and multiple metallic threads made of gold or silver. See, this is also known as, I think, sarrasser thread, which isn't a very common term, but I put it in here anyway. It's just like making wire, as you can see at that bottom right drawing. Very fine, created by pulling the wire through a series of draw plates. The circumference of each hole in the draw plate being smaller and smaller. So through a series of these, you pull out a very fine wire, and a very fine thread, I should say, and then you weave it into the brocade. So it's a beautiful fabric. New fabric, felt. Pardon me while I take a sip of water. Felt, a non-woven fabric created by pressing layers of fiber or animal hair and compressing them using heat and friction into a cloth. So this kind of interesting idea of just combing and carding this hair, not wool. Of course, that's woven, but for instance, beaver hair here in America, and just compressing it, not a weaving inside. Felt isn't the most strong material, but it is soft. It can be compressed into molded shapes. It can be quite waterproof. So it's very good for footgear and headgear. So we first see this. You look at these look like little pixie elf shoes. But they're not. They're shoes of a sultan. So let's not make jokes or judge. Let's go to the men's costume. Extensive use of layering. You can see here the sort of non-tailored look. That's why a lot of times when Westerners at the time, 16th, 17th century, look at their counterparts in Ottoman, they see them as sort of primitive. Nothing could be further from the truth. For God's sakes, they invented mathematics. We use Arabic numbers. But you see them in this sort of loose, what looks like old-fashioned clothing. To the tailored Westerners, you see a sort of backwards people. So they liked layering. The more layers you had, the more status you had. The inner layer with a simple white tunic, usually knee-length, like a camisa, but they call it the gomlek. Now, just a word here about pronunciations. I've been working on it. I think I'm pretty good, but if I mangle something, I apologize. But I'm pretty sure about gomlek. Made of cotton or linen. It was a disposable product. You would wear it until it got dirty, and then you would toss it out. So we don't have any gomleks from around the Middle Ages, medieval world, Renaissance period that have survived. Just pictures like this. Usually had long sleeves, flaring out at the wrist. Usually a round neckline with a slit in it, not uncommon. And then another part of the inner layer was a pair of trousers called, salvar. You see trousers extensively used by the Ottomans and their precursors because of their tradition of horse riding, and trousers are good for that. These are the more, what's the word I'm looking for? The more sophisticated Ottoman trousers. So salvars, baggy at the top, narrow or gathered at the ankle, made of linen or silk. We now call these harem pants. More on that later. Then your outer layer consists of a long fitted coat called the antari, or what we better know as the kaftan. Kaftan's long, knee to ankle length, beautifully brocaded usually. You can see even this in this engraving, this sultan here with his brocaded kaftan. If there was a neckline, it's usually round or keyhole. You might wear 2 layers of kaftans, with the outer layer being a short or no-sleeved kaftan to allow the inner sleeves of the inner kaftan to be seen, as you can also see on the gentleman on the left. So the more kaftans you have, the bigger a fish you are. Often the kaftans were gored to give them fuller skirts, richly decorated too. Garments of the wealthy class usually find silk richly brocaded with gold thread. Now we have no gumliks of the period, but we have a plethora of kaftans in excellent condition. You can see here, do a little circle here with it. You can see that triple, there's little triple balls there. There's little triple circles to show wealth. And you can see around those this sort of border made of gold thread. So it's a huge kaftan. Very elaborate. Here's a close-up. You can see usually buttoned to the waist for an inner kaftan. Excuse me. Because you were layering, right, you have the gomlek, then you might have an inner kaftan, then an outer kaftan. Usually on the outer kaftan, you need these gussets. You can see here, I got a blue arrow pointing to it, so I don't really need the marker. You show this, the blue arrow shows this big gusset. So support under the arm, so when you lift your arm, you didn't tear it out. Some other kaftan ideas: open sewn rows with short loose sleeves or no sleeves at all. The outer kaftan, that is, no buttons. If a kaftan such as this were made from silk and given as a reward, a robe of state is called a halat. Just a little bit of trivia for you there, in case you were wondering about the types of kaftans. Tied around the waist of one of the kaftans, usually the inner one, was a sash called a ukyur. So that is one I'm not sure of. There's a couple of pronunciations, but I'm going to go with ukyur. The C with the little diacritical mark on it, which name escapes me now, is usually a soft C, but it doesn't make sense to say uskurs. So I'm just going to say ukyur. There, sorry, that's all I'm going to say about that. Ukyurs are sashes made of silks or linens. Ottoman men did not wear belts. Moving on. Ukyurs are good for tucking the ends of your kaftan so they wouldn't get muddy, as seen here. If you were a poor man and couldn't afford a nice kaftan, you would probably wear a short vest known as a sepkin, made of wool or cotton, sometimes even of felt. Even though it may have buttons, it was usually worn open. So you can see this is very characteristic of Aladdin type things, that sepkin over a gomlek with salvar or harum pants. Here ends part A. Part B will begin with continuation of accessories for men, headgear and footgear, and continue on with women and end with specialty costumes. Thank you.